Okay, guys.
This is so weird.
I know. Okay, so listen, we're on Spotify now. Hi, if you're watching Spotify, this is the video. But we have to do the whole video. The intro has to be video too. So Nate and I want to do an intro to the episode that we just did, but we don't know if we should look at you guys or like this. What should we do? Actually, it's not that weird to look at them.
No, it's
right?
I think this is how it should
It's better
be,
than I thought it would be.
It's like
we'll just talk to each other in the thing.
It's just different.
Yeah, it's totally different. Okay. That was a great episode.
Yeah, it was good.
Right?
It was smooth, like it just flowed.
Yeah.
Very, very, very smooth. Great speaker, great individual.
Great speaker, great individual. Y'all, we had my friend Chris Stewart, aka Hollywood. He actually recorded an episode. He was like my third guest ever when we were still recording at the studio. His episode is called Chris's Day of Poop. You want to go back and listen to it?
We talk about poop a lot.
Chris talks about poop a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, and you and I too.
Wait, no, I'm talking about like the podcast,
Yeah,
but then Chris talked about poop a lot even in the episode.
We kind of do. Although, you know what? I recently posted an Instagram poll and said, what do you guys want to hear about? And
Poop.
someone said the NDPE episode was my favorite. So there you go. So yeah, so we got another episode
about
talking
like
about
poop and boofing. I mean, I talk about poop. I don't know.
Yeah, but boofing was not.
It's just funny.
I never boofed anything.
I know, I didn't either, but it's just like,
Yeah.
you mention boofing, people just think it's funny.
That is
You
really
know, I mean,
funny. You answered one of my polls with just the word boofing.
I know,
Remember that?
because I thought it was funny.
It was funny. Oh wait, it was the same one. What
Yeah, it
you
was
talked
the
about,
same
and you said boofing.
one.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, I'm not knocking it. Like, you can do it, whatever. So
If I had known it would have gotten me high faster, I would have done it. I just
for
hadn't heard
sure.
of it.
Yeah,
I
for
absolutely
Yeah, you
would
could
have done that.
probably salvage some veins too, eh?
Right? Exactly.
Your doctor would probably appreciate that.
Totally. But yeah, you guys are going to really like today's episode. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And let us know what you think of the video option on Spotify
we
now.
don't have to like get scrunched in.
I know, I did get a bigger
Yeah,
camera,
yeah,
but
we-
it's way clearer
Yeah,
now,
we
which is
don't
a little
have
bit
to scrunch
scary.
in, we're pushing
Well,
each
we're still
other.
scrunched in, but I'm going to get a new mic.
I hit my head on this last one. I smacked it during the middle of the show.
I know. He also like almost took off my hair.
Yeah, I'm
just
just
now,
like,
but-
'cause, yeah,
I know.
broad
I know. But we got a new camera this week, so you guys can see us. But anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us again for this episode. As always, Nod Pod, let us know what you think of the episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Okay, so yeah, Nate's here, and he was actually just telling me, he was like, Chris got mad at me recently because what happened?
Oh yeah, so I posted a picture of me tagging a wall, and Kevin Conte was like, "That's illegal," and I was like, "It's not illegal if you get caught." And Chris was like, "Sir, that is definitely very much illegal." And he like called me on my shit, and I was like, "Well,
Good, Chris."
Oh,
You know
so
what?
funny.
Nate knows I love him to death. So
No,
you
I know.
I just put that on there because the thing is, it's important to see that when you have somebody as powerful as Nate in the community and a lot of people follow him, this is when people talk about breaking the stigma of addiction, right? There is no stigma of addiction, right? First of all, because if so, then we would have like arrested all the doctors and we would have arrested all the pharmacists that dole out millions of pills every year that Americans are actually addicted to, right?
Right.
But the stigma of addiction that like we were addressing there is the behaviors, right? So like if Kevin wouldn't have put that is that legal, then nobody would have cared. You know what I mean? It would just been some artwork and it would have been
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Kevin has to blow it up like and make it into something like he always does, you know what I mean? And so I had to like I wasn't even knocking Nate off. I was knocking Kevin off like, hey, all right. Don't
Kevin
turn
does
Nate
always do
into
that.
some
He's
kind of
always
legality issue. You know what I mean?
Okay, guys. Well, now that we got that out of the way. Oh, also, do you want to show your new haircut?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so guys, we got a big camera so that you can see Nate's hair. Look at his new haircut.
Get a little tail back there.
He thinks he looks like a samurai. Look from the front. So, guys, DM us. Let us know what you think of Nate's new haircut. Also, the video's on Spotify now, which is so cool. Chris, this is going to play video on Spotify. Isn't that cool?
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So, anyways, okay. So, yeah, I know, right? Dude, okay. So, I got a new camera so it can fit both of us, but it's like really clear, which I'm bummed about because the last one had like a filter on it. And so I'm
All
like,
right.
talk to you guys like this. I'm like, okay, now I need to put like way more makeup on. But anyways, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Chasing Heroin. My name's Jeannine. My sobriety date is January 15th, 2015.
Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Narcan Nate. Sobriety date's December 3rd, 2022.
And I am super excited. So we've actually had this guy on before. He was like our third episode ever in season 1. The title is Chris's Day of Poop. and it has gone down as one of our most popular episodes. We have the amazing Chris Stewart, aka Hollywood. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much. Jeannine, it's always a pleasure to be around anything that you are doing and have you and Nate as a team together and the three of us all together brings tears to my eyes, literally, man. You know, because we've all been through this together. You know what I mean? Like we all kind of grew up in the North County recovery scene and have been in numerous meetings together. We've spoke numerous times together. You know, obviously me and you were the back-to-back HA World Conference champions. I mean, speakers. Nate's new hairdo's got me all thinking I need to be more like John Cena today. You know what I mean?
You know what? I remember the first meeting I saw you in. So I had about 90 days, and it was an HA Tuesday night, and you were sitting up front. It's when you used to bake cakes every single week. And I had gotten a ride there, and I didn't have shit, 90 days, nothing to my name. You were towards the front in like the first or second row, and you said something, and everybody started laughing, of course. And I remember what you said. You said, I love that sound. That's the sound of the undead, man. And I just got like chills. And I just got chills again. And like, I never would have thought that 8 years later, you and I would have been speaking together at a world conference. I can't believe I made it. And I remember looking at you in your suit and thinking, God, that man like really has his shit together. And then, you know, we ended up sharing some speaker opportunities together. It's just really cool.
Yeah, the suit fools a lot of people. You know what I mean? I've gotten in a lot more doors with this suit than like most other people could. So I'm grateful for that. But yeah, I will say that, man, all the time. I'll say laughter is the sound of the undead. And once you get that back, it doesn't matter, even if it's on accident, you know what I mean? That opens the door of hope, opens the door of new possibilities, and you can move forward. So that's awesome. I love that story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I remember it so well. So the last time you were here, we had you share a specific story. Today, I would love to get just a little bit more about your background, where you're from, how you started using. I mean, obviously some of this I know, but you know, the audience doesn't. So your general story, how you got to where you are now. And I know that you are specifically very gifted in giving people like hope and inspiration. And so just like lay it on us, man.
I got my Hope Dealer sign that I had by the city of New Orleans up on this other wall. I should have switched the camera around, but now I don't want to mess it up. Well, you know, I think it's important when you want to start off and tell people where you come from, you got to start by where you ended up because it changes the dynamic. You know, I tell people this all the time, but, you know, my morning routine used to be wake up, take a shot of vodka, throw up, and next to it, I had a little like Home Depot paint bucket. Because I knew that there was no way I could get out of bed, right? Take a shot, throw up, take a shot, throw up. Usually the third or fourth one would stay down. I'd snort a half of 80 Oxycontin that was already set up because I knew I needed it immediately. If hopefully I had it, right? And then I'd smoke out of this little weed pipe that I had next to the bed, lay in the fetal position for about 5 minutes and 26 seconds to 5 minutes and 31 seconds, which was the exact amount of time I knew it would take for everything to kind of kick in. I could take the covers back off and get out of bed, right? And the reason I share that is because that was me after 10 years in 12-step recovery. In that 10 years, I hadn't missed a meeting in more than 90 days. I was on my 15th sponsor. I'd already worked the steps. And I really thought I was that one that was inconstitutionally incapable of being honest with himself. And I had to go, well, what is this all about? But then I go back 10 years, and I was actually doing better because at least I had a bed and an apartment then. Because 10 years before, I had been homeless, like shopping cart homeless in Hollywood and down on Skid Row. So like I was coming way off of that, right? So, and that's where that story comes in. We can share it later if we want, but living in the bushes and, you know, getting by on scraps of alcohol and drugs just to barely stay sick every day. And just that nightmare, you know? And then 10 years before that, I had been a young and upcoming rock and roll star in Hollywood as well and thought, man, this is great. I can't believe I'm, 16 years old and I'm going to be a rock star and I'm living in Hollywood and I'm just going to do what Hollywood people do, right? But where this actually starts is, I was actually born in Portland, Oregon, and about 15 years old, I grew up regular, I won't say regular, but my parents were missionaries and I played sports and I wasn't a bad kid, didn't get in trouble, any of those kind of things. But when I was 15, my dad came to me and we had a conversation, went like this. He said, son, me and your mother have been very tolerant of your music and of your hair choices. I was a little skate punk back then. And I want to mention, this is pre-Green Day skate punk. So that means that like people fucking hated you. So I apologize for my language, but you know what I mean? Like people throw bottles at you, call you out like homophobic slurs. We don't need to get it. So it was like a badge of honor. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like, oh, me and my 8 friends skating down the street with green hair and and little punk rock shirts from Hot Topic, and everybody thinks it's cool. You know what I mean? This is like battle. But the point was, is that my dad was like, hey, you know, you need to like get rid of that haircut, start acting more like part of this family, and we're going to move to Europe and be missionaries full time. And if that's a problem for you, then you're free to go out on your own. So I said, okay, I'll think about it. So I thought about it, came back a day later. I said, you know what? First of all, I feel unloved. I feel unappreciated. I feel unseen, and I don't feel accepted. And if none of those things are happening, why would I want to stay with this family? Because that's just going to continue. It doesn't matter what I do. Nothing's ever going to be good enough. So I'm going to try my own path. And, you know, granted, that was, you know, at 15 years old, just to leave home with a skateboard and a bass guitar was pretty, I don't say ballsy. It was kind of stupid, really. But what happened was, is that, you know, I'd had a few beers and, you know, stuff like that. So, I wasn't like completely like innocent, but, you know, I wasn't using drugs and alcohol at that time. That was just me being me and wanting to be famous as a rock star. And I think a lot of people can identify with that if you come from a poor background, right? Like I moved out, I spent about a month couch surfing around, and then I got taken in by the leader of a gang. We lived in this like abandoned punk rock house. It had no electricity, no hot running water, but at least it had doors. And, you know, I was given a room. I had a sleeping bag on the floor. You know, we had like rodents and roaches, and, you know, you slept with the sleeping bag over your head, you know what I mean? Because you didn't want to, a couple times I didn't know this, and, you know, things would run over my face in the middle of the night and freak you out and stuff. So one night, this guy I was living with was like, hey, you want to smoke some weed? I was like, nah, man, I don't smoke weed, you know? And I said, well, he goes, we'll probably help you sleep. Because I was telling him, man, I can't sleep, you know what I mean? I'm freaked out. He said, well, I said, okay, I'll try it. So I tried a little bit of weed, and you know what? I slept like a baby that night. I said, this stuff ain't that bad. And then, you know, and then on the weekend, you know, we'd go out to these punk rock shows, and back then it was very, very violent. You know what I mean? It was pretty much, it was like different punk rock gangs, or just, you know, like, wasn't like a, you know, hold hands and everybody's having fun like it is today. And me being only 15 and all the other people that I hung out with being at least 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, you know, I started drinking to get a little bit of courage because I was trying to act tough. You know what I mean? I was like, so I only used drugs and alcohol medicinally pretty much for a long time. And what I mean by that is, you know, I would drink on the weekends so I could get in the spirit of like the violence of the mosh pit. You know, I would smoke some weed pretty much every other day or every day to go to sleep. And then I started, you know, to drink a little bit more. And I didn't like being out of control because I didn't want to get, you know, beat up. Some guy turned me on to some cocaine. I thought, oh, this is a good combo, right? So now I had a little bit of coke to keep me from getting too drunk. I had a little bit of weed to go to sleep. I had this, right? And then one day this guy came to my house dressed in a suit, asking me, hey, can you give me some heroin? And he was like my kind of, I was dealing drugs at the time, and, you know, he had a lot of grow houses or whatever, so he was supplying me with marijuana. And I thought, well, I'm like, heroin, what are you, crazy? I would never do heroin. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff will kill you. And then he told me how much money he would give me to get him the heroin. I said, you know what, let me make a call, right? Because it was a lot of money for a kid my age, right? Like 17 years old. And it was literally like, for what he wanted, it was almost like $600, which would probably be like close to like $4,000 in today's market, right? You gotta remember this is back in 1986. So I made a call, and I'll never forget this. I called this woman, and her name is Fat Michelle, and God rest in peace. But, you know, she was like the iconic punk rock character. You know what I mean? She was about 5 foot tall, about 260 pounds, covered in tattoos with spiky blonde hair, and carried like a gun and a knife in her purse and an 8-ball of crack and everything. You know what I mean? Like, and she would like, anyway, she was a character. But I said, hey, listen, I need to get some heroin. And I'll never forget this. She said right to my face, she goes, Chris, I will never give you heroin. She goes, you're not a heroin kind of guy. I said, well, I know. It's not for me. She goes, I don't care. I don't want you involved in that shit. She goes, like, you know, like, you're a great kid. Like, don't fuck up your life. That stuff will, you know, mess up your life. And I was like, don't worry. I got it under control. Just do it this one time. And so she goes, okay, I'll do it one time. But if I ever hear about this, you doing it ever again, I will personally come over there and beat the crap out of you. And that scared me because she was like the toughest person I knew, girl or guy. So she arranged a meeting between me and this guy. And I went and met the guy. And I'll never forget this because like the guy told me to meet him at a bar, but I'm only 17. And I had a fake ID, but like it wasn't that good. So I didn't really try to use it in like random bars. You know what I mean? I'd use it for like punk rock shows or, you know, like little Asian liquor markets or something, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't like walk into like a rig, right? So like I'm sitting there for like a half hour. This is before he had cell phones, you know what I mean? So like I couldn't call the guy. So I'm just sitting there. And finally I see a guy that I would assume, you know, looks like a heroin dealer come out of the bar. I'm like, man, over here. You know what I mean? He's like, He goes, oh, I wait for you all 30 minutes. I'm like, dude, I'm 17. I don't have an idea to get I should have told you. You know what I mean? I was trying to be cool. But, I'll never forget, always been entrepreneurial in spirit, right? So the minute he gave me what I was supposed to get, I said, oh, by the way, Michelle told me just to get your number so I could, if in case I need to do this again, I don't have to go through her. He was like,
Of course you did. Of course you did.
shit.
Why wouldn't you do that?
yeah, right. So then all of a sudden I was like directly connected. So about 2 weeks later, this guy comes back over to my house and he wants to do it again. So I call up the guy. We do the same thing. And this time I'll never forget, because this time when I brought it back, the guy was like, hey, I need some tinfoil. I'm like, well, there's a bong right on the table, man. What do you need tinfoil for, right? And he was like, dude, because I'm going to smoke this. I'm like, you can smoke heroin? I'm like, I'd always pick, the only drug addicts, or not, shouldn't they, the only heroin users, IV users that I knew at that time were like Sid Vicious, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, like big time rock and roll stars that, only portrayed like IV use. There was no recreational heroin use like there is today. I say recreational, but you know what I mean? But it wasn't in every city, man. You had to be in like a port city, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, and it wasn't anywhere in between then. So I didn't know. So anyway, and then the guy's like, oh, by the way, I'm short $100. Why don't I just leave you some of this? I'm like, dude, I don't want any of that. And then I saw him smoking it. And I thought, well, I said, I already smoked cigarettes and weed and I smoked some coke. I said, well, I'll just try it. Why not? So I did. I tried it that day, and a couple, puffs later, and it was like magic. Boom. And I realize now that, because at this point I had 2 years of excessive, extreme violence in my life. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of like gang violence and seen a lot of things kids don't need to see. I had some broken relationships. And what that did is I took that little insecure kid and just like released that huge amount of dopamine where everything was okay. And I'm like, I don't know why people talk so bad about this heroin stuff. I feel good. You know what I mean? I'm so much looser. I picked up my bass, started rocking out. I'm like, this is magical. No wonder people,
feeling. It is magical.
It is. And ever since that day, you know what I mean? That just continued, and like I said, I didn't just go like straight from using it at 17 into the gutter. You know what I mean? I would like space it out over the years, and, my drinking would increase and all of my drug use would increase. And, I'd go through phases where I try to get back on track and, have all these jobs and all this stuff. But then when I turned 25, I was living in San Francisco. And first of all, I swore like 20, maybe 18 when I moved to Los Angeles, and I spent a couple years there living in Hollywood trying to get this rock and roll thing started, that I would never move to San Francisco, because like everybody in San Francisco was a hardcore junkie that I knew, at least in the punk rock scene. And I'm like, I'm not moving there. It was like New York, that same kind of, those people are too hardcore for me. And then all of a sudden I found myself moving to San Francisco when I was like 25. And that's really when things changed, you know what I mean? Because then all of a sudden it was like delivery, right? There's like this whole thing in San Francisco. That was the first city I'd ever lived in where like you would literally call up anytime between like 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And within 5 minutes, some dude would just be at your door knocking, drop it off. Like, it doesn't matter, right? And once you turned into a good customer, you could call from anywhere in the city and just be like, I'm on the corner of Polk and 15th. He's like, 3 minutes, right? And some guy would just show up in 3 minutes, done. And you're like, this is great. You know what I mean? So that really sent me down a deep, dark hole, you know what I mean? Because then it was all about, and it was cheap too. Like in Portland, I was probably paying like almost 10 times what I was paying in San Francisco. So, when you like literally have to only have like $10 or $20 to get high compared to like 50 or 60, it like anybody can come up with $20, you know what I mean? So that's really where things spiraled. But the other thing that spiraled is that's where I met my future wife. And so, she was from Boston, and her brothers had been in the rock and roll scene, and, and all this stuff. And so she was like familiar with it. And so it was like clear from the get-go, like, I'm not putting up with this, right? So I got clean for a while, and tried to do things right. And then I'd relapse and this and that. And then kind of what happened was that we finally, about 5 years later, we got married. We bought a house in Santa Monica. She was the director of marketing for Activision video game company. Her first game was Tony Hawk Pro Skater. She was the one that like made that game, And so when all that happened, I thought, okay, great. You know what I mean? I've been dabbling and doing drugs and trying to be this rock and roll star for almost 15 years at that point. I'm like, I got a house in Santa Monica, got a successful wife. I'm good. That's it for me. I'm out, right? Tap out. I'm done with the drugs and the alcohol. I'm going to turn my life around. But the challenge is that when I wanted to quit, or when I could have quit, I didn't want to quit. And when I wanted to quit, I couldn't quit. And within like our first year of marriage, like she kicked me out and that was it, because all of a sudden I had nothing to do. I'm living in the suburbs. I quit the band. I wanted to turn over this new leaf. I couldn't get I had a job for a while and then I lost that because the company went out of business and I couldn't get another job. And I met a guy that knew a guy. And next thing you know, I'm down in, it was like, have you ever seen that movie Permanent Midnight with Ben Stiller?
I don't think so. No.
You got to check it out. It's it's a story of like the guy that wrote that TV show Alf. Remember that with like weird little puppet Alf?
I remember Alf. Yeah.
Yeah, but so the point is that in the movie, right, he's married to Elizabeth Hurley and he's a writer in Hollywood and he wrote this character Alf, but he's like a hardcore heroin addict. So like he's with her during the day and they look all great. And then like as soon as she goes to work, he like gets in his Cadillac and drives down into East Los Angeles, starts hanging out with like these crazy gangbanger Mexican cartel members, just doing heroin all day. And eventually, obviously, it ruins his life, right? So every time he shows up somewhere, he's just like out of it and all these things. But that's kind of like this double life that I was living. It's like, my wife's successful. She'd work all day. I had nothing to do. I'd borrow some money from our bank account, go down into East Los Angeles, hang out with these gang members and whatever. And, it just finally the gig was up and that was it. And she kicked me out. And that's when I talk about when I went and I was completely homeless, right? Like I lived in my car. They towed my car. Then I lived on the streets for almost up to a year until I became unrecognizable in a storefront window one day. And I'll never forget, I think you've heard the story, but, I was at Ralph's down on Santa Monica and 3rd Street. That's where you could turn in all your cans and bottles. So like Thursday was like payday for us, right? Like, and I was so embarrassed to be homeless. I would like literally put on like different clothes. Sometimes I'd put this like fake beard on. I'd put a hat on, cowboy hat. And then I'd take my shopping cart and like start taking all the bottles out of people's recycling at like 4 a.m. You know what I mean? So by the time I got down to Ralph's, I cashed in all this and I don't know, I had like $27 or something, which was decent, right? Tossing nickel cans. I owed this guy like $2. He had bought me like a beer like a week before. And I went over to him and I said, Jerry, here's your $2 back. And I'll never forget this guy. He looked like a quintessential homeless guy, right? Like no teeth, big gray beard, just dirty. And he goes, Chris, you keep it, man. You need it worse than I do. And I remember going, how dare you, sir? You know what I mean? I was like, that is like, what a jerk you are. You know what I mean? Like, what is the matter with you? I barely, I got it going on, And then I walked around the corner and like literally looked in this storefront window and just like started crying. I'm like, oh my God, is that me? You know what I mean? Like I was unrecognizable to myself. And so I went through this whole process and, like it was so bad off. I had to go to like the public library and that's when they only gave you 10 minutes at a time on the computer and it was timed. So it didn't matter if you wanted to stay there or not. It was 10 minutes and like it would just, the screen would disappear and you couldn't restart till you went and got another password from the lady at the desk. So I went there, sent an email to my sister. Then I'd come back the next day and open it up. And my sister was like, yeah, we'll help you. But here's like 3 pages of rules. You know what I mean? My sister's a lawyer. She's very documented. And it was like, you got to get a job within 72 hours. You got to go to AA within 24 hours. You got to do this. No smoke. No, don't bring any people to my house. No, and if you mess up any of these things, it's instant termination. So I was like, great. So I came out and started my life over at like 32 years old. I worked at Rock Bottom Brewery, which I thought was so prolific. You know what I mean? Like coming off of Skid Row, working for Rock Bottom Brewery and having to stay sober at the same time.
Dude, I went to a rehab next to Rock Bottom in La Jolla. And
I know where you see, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, and I remember looking at my mom and I was like, cool. So you just go till you hit rock bottom and take a fucking right? Like, how is this right? Real life right now? You know what I mean? Really? And I remember my mom was actually like cracking up laughing. Would you mind sharing my favorite story before we move on? Because it happened right around now, right? I know you shared it in that first episode, but we've picked up thousands of listeners since then. So let's share it again.
This one usually I like to keep for like the behind the closed doors, like actual true heroin addict meetings because it's a little bit vulgar, but because we are trying to reach as many people as possible.
Like vulgar around here, yeah.
Yeah, and because it is a true story. So right before I had asked my sister for help, I'm homeless, right? And one day I wake up and I'm in the bushes and I'm about a block off Hollywood Boulevard over like off of Whitley, Cahuenga, in that area, if you guys know where that's at, if you're listening, because it's still exactly the same. I was just filming a documentary about my life about 4 months ago. I went over that same corner and now there's like 10, 15 tents there. I couldn't even get in if I wanted. I have to get a reservation. You can't even be homeless in that area. Now they got it locked down. They got all the good spots. You know what I mean? I'd be screwed. But so I wake up in like, it's like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I wake up. I'm in the bushes. I know I'm in the bushes. I put myself in the bushes because that was like, I like to be guarded from people. And I had like a little bit of heroin and a Mickey's Big Mouth, which I drank the beer. I had the cap. I put the heroin in the cap. I'm trying to mix it up. And I keep noticing like all these flies landing on me. You know what I mean? And I am not good with flies, ants, roaches. I think it's like PTSD from when I was living in abandoned houses as a kid or whatever. So that kind of stuff just irks me. So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to, do my morning like little shot just so I can get out of the bushes and get going. And these flies just keep landing all over me. It's just bugging me to death. So finally, I look behind me. I'm like, where do these flies come from? I turn around and there's this like huge pile of dog poop that I was like laying right next to, right? I'm sure I'd rolled over in it too at some point. I just didn't check myself. But I'm like, that is disgusting, right? And you're really bad when you're homeless when you get indignant at a dog for pooping in your spot. I'm like, yeah, I'm like looking at dogs in the eyes, like, was it you? Like, I see like a German Shepherd on me. That looks like a German Shepherd size, man. You know what? This is my area. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to take one to show you who's boss, but I'm thinking about it, okay? So I get my syringe loaded up or whatever and gather my few belongings, like a half pint of vodka, and put it in my pocket. And I think it's all I actually had, that in the syringe. So I put that like in my sock. And I'm like, I'm going to my other spot. And so I walked over on Sunset and Gower. That was my other spot. And it was like this business building, but in the back they had these like two big dumpsters. And there was like a parking lot. But when you parked, you had to go around the other side to go in the front door. So nobody ever came over to that side. It was kind of like a little hideaway. And then I could see from both sides. So I go over there and I pull the dumpster back. And no joke, there's a big pile of human poop underneath the dumpster. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, what did I do to deserve this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to get high. And now I'm like rolling in dog poop. Now I come over to my spot and some human being has disgraced my spot by extra poop. But I'm like, I don't care at this point. I'm getting dope sick. And the smell of that was making me even more dope sick. So I just, put one leg over one side and one leg over the other and crouch back against the wall. And I'm sitting there getting ready to, shoot up. And all of a sudden the door to the business opens up. And the guy's bringing trash out to the thing. And I'm like looking around the corner, like, I felt like, what's that, Dave Chappelle, you know what I mean? Tyrone Biggums. I felt like Tyrone Biggums, you know what I mean? Like, and all of a sudden I'm sitting, and like, the thing is what's going through my head is I'm not worried that the guy is going to think I'm a heroin junkie sitting there just shooting off, getting high in his dumpster. I'm worried that he's going to think that the poop underneath me is actually mine and that's going back there. So I'm like, oh no. So I'm trying to figure out how I can stand up and swerve over to the side. And luckily, just at that time, like his cell phone had rung, and like it was like he picked it up and he was literally like 5 feet from the dumpster. He hadn't seen me yet. And he was like, oh yeah, it's on my desk. Hold on. And so he like literally threw the trash, whatever it was, at the dumpster and then ran back inside, and I did my stuff and then bailed out. But yeah, that just gives you the level of degradation that you go to just trying to like get through the day. You know what I mean? This was like all by 9 a.m. That's how my day started, And there's just plenty of other times like that. And what ended up happening is once I got out to the East Coast, I cleaned up real good and got into AA and became a firefighter and all this stuff. And then, it's one of those things, you hear about, like, I let the gifts of the program take me out of the program. I'm like, oh, I'm a firefighter now. I got this, I got that. I'm good, and I met a bottle of pills in somebody's medicine cabinet one day and took a couple of those and had a couple of Miller Lights. And, I was talking about this, and when I explain it to kids, I'm like, when you're raised in the Christian faith, let's say, or not even in the Christian faith, just period, right? You always hear this, like, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, right? So it's like, if you, I don't know, let's just say, if you have sex before marriage, God's going to throw lightning bolts or something, right? Or if you do this, or if you use drugs, or if, you do all these things. But then what happens is that you do them and it doesn't happen right away, And so you're like, oh man, people were making that up. You know what I mean? I had sex with her, nothing happened. I masturbated, nothing happened. I tried drugs, nothing happened, And it's the same thing. Like when you go back out on a relapse, like the first couple times, maybe, like until you get to like that really point in your life where you don't have that option anymore. But I mean, for me, man, I was relapsing for like 20 years. And by that, I mean, I would try to quit for a couple months and I'd go back out. I don't really consider that a relapse. I never really put all the work into it. But even when I put all the work into it and I still relapse, it's always the same. I start with something small that I don't really care about. I always joke about it nowadays, but first thing I tell kids, I'm like, stay away from that White Claw. that shit is the devil. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know what it tastes like, but you don't need any kind of like whatever it is, like soda looking alcoholic beverage. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't need that. Either drink the hard stuff or don't drink at all. You know what I mean? Because that kind of stuff I think is even more dangerous to alcoholics, because it puts them in this fake sense of security that they can drink 2 or 3 of those and be fine, and drink 2 or 3 of those and be fine. Because it's not like a 2 shots of whiskey or something where like something's going to change. You know what I mean? It's just like this nice little temperate level. But the thing is, the whole time it's doing is making your body dependent on it. And it's also treating your trauma. That's the thing you got to watch out for, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I get fired from the fire department. For one night, I got a DUI hit and run on an off-duty police officer. And, you know, if you're gonna go big. You know what I mean? It's the only DUI I've ever gotten. But
I've known you 8 years. I never knew that story.
Yeah, I don't share that one too often.
Okay.
But as long as we're going with the poop story, I got to bring it all the way around. But and the thing is that when it happened, even then, I thought I would be okay. And what I mean by that is when I got pulled over a couple blocks away, I didn't even realize I had hit the guy. And officer asked me if I'd been drinking. I denied it adamantly, but I'd probably been drinking for like 8 hours, literally. And at that point, I was drinking and doing a lot of coke. So, you know, I'm not making this up when I say I'd had about 8 shots of Tuaca, about 4 vodka Red Bulls, and about 6 pints of beer. And that was at work, right? I was a bartender at a steakhouse. So like all that had happened between like 4 and 10 p.m. And I'd probably done about 2 grams of coke. So it had offset the booze. So even though it sounds like a lot of booze, I thought I was doing good. I was like, you know, I feel pretty good. In fact, I was on my way to another bar to meet a lady. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't even on my way home. You know what I mean? But what happened, though, is that I remember something hitting my truck, and I turned around, and I saw a guy, a big African-American guy in like a black trench coat, like flipping me off. And what I thought, it was raining that night, and what I had thought is that I had clipped the corner. I was taking a right-hand turn on a green, so he had the light, and he was walking. I didn't see him, and I thought I had clipped like the curb or something. You know what I mean? Because I knew I was a little tipsy, and it was like a weird kind of intersection. There was like a big puddle, and I remember splashing that puddle. I thought, oh, maybe I didn't see the curb, and I splashed this guy, and that's why he was flipping me off. So I didn't realize he was just gotten up off the ground. I go back around like another block around looking for parking, and 3 FBI cops like come down the opposite side of the road, box me in. And you know, at this point, I'm still oblivious. I'm looking around like, holy smokes, man, there's something going on around here. You know what I mean? I'm like looking out my window, like, whoa. And the guy's like, oh yeah, look, you know, I roll the window down about this far. I go, what can I do for you, officer? He goes all the way down. And you know, and then he was like, have you been drinking? I said, absolutely not. And I said what I always said at the time. I knew what I was doing. I knew I was drinking. So I had about 5 of those firefighter stickers in my back window. I went, firefighter. You know what I mean? And that had worked numerous times to get me off of just to give you an idea. About 2 months before that, I was driving in the middle of the day out day drinking, and it was like kind of rainy, and I misjudged a light, and I hit the brakes too long, and I had a big monster truck, and I skidded and ran over a stop sign, like knocked it right down in front of a cop, and then kept going, and he pulled me over a block away, and he said, where are you going? I said, sorry, man, I was you know, firefighter. And there was a fire station about a block away. I said, I'm late for work. And he said, okay, listen, watch out, man. You ran over a stop sign back there. You got to be more careful. I said, oh, I did? Jeez, sorry, man. I'm trying to get, you know, work. He goes, that's okay. He goes, but park the truck. I don't want you driving anymore. I don't know what you've been doing. I don't need to know, but just park your truck and walk the rest of the way. I said, okay, officer. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to work. I didn't work at that fire station. You know what I mean? I worked like all the way down across town, but I walked like a block away, wait for him to like go. And then I ended up like walking home, which was like a mile because I didn't want to chance it. You know what I mean? That had always worked. And this time it didn't work. And I remember after the field sobriety test, the guy was like, hey, listen, I'm taking you in. I said, taking me in for what? I'm a firefighter. I just told you that. I said, you know the rule. He said, oh, I know the rule, Chris. He said, here's the problem. Look over your shoulder. And when I did that, I saw that African-American guy. He said, that's Officer Charles Johnson, North Carolina Highway Patrol. And he's in town for a vigil for all the fallen policemen. His brother was just killed in a drunk driving accident 2 years ago. He was on his way back to his hotel. He said a truck matching your description ran him down in the crosswalk, stopped, looked at him, and kept going. He called officer down 911. It's already all over their airwaves. He said he just personally identified you. He goes, there's nothing I can do, man. I got to take you in.
Oh
Now,
my God.
the good part about this story, well, there's a lot, but the part where I know God was watching out for me, let's say that, is that I got arrested by FBI, not by city cops. So that meant that they put me in the FBI jail, not in the city jail. Because had I gone to the city jail, things might have been a lot different. Because then I would have been there till at least Monday or Tuesday before they even saw my case or whatever that looked like. I would have got a public defender. Instead, they put me in the FBI jail, and I happen to know a couple of really good lawyers because at that steakhouse that I worked at, they would all come in and do the old 5, martini vodka lunch, So no joke, I didn't know who this guy was, but he'd give me this card. He says, "If you ever get in trouble, call me." I called this guy, no joke, at 12 o'clock on a Friday night. I got out of that FBI holding tank at 5 a.m. So it was a gift. But here's the thing about when you're an alcoholic, you know what I did? I got out at 5. I sat around for like an hour. I called a cab and had them take me straight to 7-Eleven because they started selling booze at 6 a.m. I bought a case of beer, and went home. That was it, and it just kept going and going and going. And, finally I got engaged again and moved from Arlington, Virginia, where I was working and that, and, moved out to Las Vegas. And I don't know why I would move to Las Vegas, like the worst possible idea ever. If you heard my story already for the last like 25 minutes, moving to Las Vegas is a terrible idea. But I moved there and everything happened that you think would happen. I made it about a week in AA, and I knew when I got there, I'm like, okay, you better go to AA right away. You know what I mean? And, I went there for a while, and then I got a job and started making a bunch of money, and everybody else was having fun drinking. I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing now. And there you go. And that took me right back. Like within a month, I was drinking around the clock. And within a year was that wake up when I tell you how I woke up every morning. So that was just kind of like, that's what it was. And then, I came out to San Diego, and I always like to share this story too, because this is important, like when we talk about the ending. But February 7th, 2010, I was laying in this bed in Las Vegas, like I described earlier in the story, waking up, drinking, snorting Oxycontin, all these things. And that day I woke up and I had nothing. I was out of everything. I was out of money. I think I had like $7 in my name. My phone had been ringing nonstop, and I thought it was drug dealers that I owed money to. Instead, when I looked at all the text messages, they were text messages from all my friends and family saying, "Hey, congratulations, the New Orleans Saints are in the Super Bowl." And I'm like, what? And I was so out of it that like I'd been a Saints fan since I was 17 years old. And at 40 years old or 39, I still didn't even know that, like, I knew they were in the Super Bowl or they were doing good, but I didn't even know it was Super Bowl Sunday. I was just oblivious, right? Like just in that darkened room with the comforter over the window and just surrounded by trash and, just living to use. And that was it, right? And hoping to die at any minute. And I remember I went to the gas station and got like 2 cans of Ice House malt liquor and like a bottle of Barefoot Merlot for $7 on my last. And I went back. I started drinking, watching the game, and then I ran out of everything again about the halfway through. And I remember saying, "You know what? Tell you what." I was pissed at God at this point. I said, "Tell you what, God, if you're still out there, tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Today, I'm done." I said, "If you let the Saints win the Super Bowl," and I don't recommend this prayer, by the way. This is the one I prayed. "If you let the Saints win the Super Bowl, I will turn my life around and I will, do whatever you ask me to do." I said, "But if not, then consider today my last day on earth. I don't know how I'm going to do it because I don't have a gun. I don't have any way to kill myself, but I'm not doing this anymore, right? I'll jump off a bridge. I'll figure something out." And all of a sudden, within like 35 minutes, a couple plays happened. They got a couple turnovers. They did this, they did that. And all of a sudden the Saints won the Super Bowl.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a problem like wanting to kill myself at this point, but I have a problem like having to like make a deal with God, and he comes through on his end, which means I have to come through on my end. And I have no idea how to come through on my end. I got no job. I got no money. I'm addicted to oxys. I'm addicted to alcohol. Like where if I don't drink every couple hours, I start getting seizures and the shakes. You know what I mean? Like physically dependent upon all this stuff. And I got no light at the end of the tunnel. And, a couple things happened where I got a little bit of money randomly from like a tax return. It finally had come in. I forgot about it. And I literally got in my car one day. I remember I had like 10 Oxy 30s left. This guy had given me 10 Oxy 30s. And that was it though. My drug dealer had died. And this guy was like the last guy that I knew. And he said, "This is my last one. I'm out because the cops are all over now that the big guy died. Now they're infiltrating everything and all this stuff." And he said, "This is it." So I got those 10. I remember I bought like 3 cans of beer. I snorted 5 of them in a row. And I just walked to my car, like literally. And I loaded my car with the exact same things I had left home at 39 years old. I had a acoustic guitar, not even a bass guitar at this point, acoustic guitar. I had like 3 punk rock t-shirts, a pair of Dickies, a backpack, and I think like a skateboard. That was all I owned. I just put it all in my car, and I just drove from Las Vegas to San Diego. And I had a friend here, and he wasn't into recovery or anything. He was just a good guy, and he helped me out. I started going to Dawn Patrol, and that was an AA meeting down in Pacific Beach, and and I got sober, man, and I started, just then I really started this whole life of service that I talk about, and that was back, like I said, in 2010, and for 3 years, man, I was just doing everything I could to stay sober, man. My get well job was I was working at Best Buy as like a cable TV signer upper. The guy that stands out front, tries to sign you up for that. I did that for 8 months, 6 days a week. You want to talk about a brutal job? At 40 years old, when you thought you were going to be a rock star, what I mean? Hey, what cable service do you have? Oh, Cox. Oh, F Cox. Those people are terrible, man. You need DirecTV, man. How you like football? When they take it, you know what I mean? But I did that every day, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And the Best Buy people liked how good of a salesman I was. So they ended up hiring me to work actually inside Best Buy selling TVs. And then I did that for a while. And then I started to speak and I started taking courses on leadership. Because for me, recovery is never just about 12-step recovery. It's not enough. It doesn't address everything it needs to address. I love 12-step recovery, but it's not enough. And especially it's not enough these days, And it's like, you need to have a combination. Because the two things that, I always like to say is it's like trauma is the root of codependency. Codependency is the root of addiction. And addiction is the root of the evils in your life, right? And I define the evils in your life as the emotions you're unable to process or the things that you're unable to obtain in your life, right? It's not like a demonic possession, but those are the things, right? So most people, they figure out, okay, I can't be in relationships. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm drinking too much. I'm using too many drugs. Okay, let me go to like a treatment program or something like that. They come there. They start going to meetings. That's great. They work the 12 steps. That's great. But then they never address codependency, and rarely do they address enough of the traumas, So it's like you need to go through all those things in order to have a successful recovery long term, right?
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So what is the trauma codependency link?
So the trauma codependency link is that at some point in our lives, we have these, what we call traumas. And unfortunately, trauma has been given.
It's become like a buzzword.
It's like a buzzword. And then it's also, most people assumed a trauma is some kind of physical or sexual abuse.
Right.
And which it's not, right? So word trauma gets a bad rap, is what I was trying to say. Because most people, they say, oh, Chris, I don't have any traumas. Like I was never sexually molested and never beaten up. So I don't know why I'm an alcoholic. I'm like, well, no, trauma isn't the event. It's what you made it mean. And let me give you a great little, just a quick example, if you want, is when I was 8 years old on New Year's Eve, we were over at another family's house, and when you're like 8, and like, especially if you go to a church, you go to like some other family's house, you play board games, you eat pizza, it's a real simple deal. So we were over there and doing this and that. And we changed into our pajamas, this and that. And my dad always had these old clunker vehicles, right? We're poor. So like they'd be considered classic cars nowadays, but at the time they were embarrassing to be seen in, you know what I mean? And we had this old like 65 F100 Ford truck, you know what I mean? All rusted out. And anyway, so we piled in as a family. It had been snowing that day. We were in Eugene, Oregon. So it doesn't normally snow, right? But this was kind of like a cool thing, but it was still snowing about, 3 or 4 inches on the ground, not that much. And about halfway home, we lived about 4 miles away. The old truck just gives out. Boom. Battery goes dead on the side of the road. Nothing we can do. And at this point, we got to remember this is before cell phones. And, it's New Year's Eve, so nobody's out. This is like a real suburban neighborhood. Everybody's in their own houses. It's about 10 o'clock at night, probably. So most people have already gone to bed or they're doing whatever. So we have nobody to help us, right? So what happens is my dad picks my sister up because she's about 5 or 6 at this point. And he holds on to her and he goes, okay, let's go, right? And me and my mom, we hold hands or whatever. And like we all walk in the snow. Well, it took us, about 10 or 15 minutes to finally walk all the way home. Now, what happened is that everything was like, keep moving. We don't want to get frostbite. We don't want to do this. And I got like little slippers on or something. I don't even have regular shoes on, my pajamas. Like, I don't think I had a coat because, we didn't plan on this happening. So I'm freezing cold. We finally make it to the house. And when I get into bed, right, I get into bed and my mom's rubbing my feet. Don't worry, Chris, you'll feel your feet again, right? It was all this panic, right? I make myself, the thought that occurs to me is that my dad is no longer suitable to take care of me. So on that day, I quit trusting my dad for everything. I didn't trust him to love me. I didn't trust him to provide for me. I didn't trust him to teach me how to be a man. I didn't trust him for anything. That is a trauma. You understand? So nothing
Mhm.
really had happened. Like if we would have played a game out of it, like, okay, how fast do you think we can make it to the house? Let's pretend the snow is like water and we're running like Jesus, you know what I mean? Or something like, or we would have had like some kind of thing like where it wasn't like a catastrophe situation, it might have been different. Or if we would have got back to the house, my dad's like, guys, I'm real sorry. I should have checked the truck's battery, or we should have, I should have got us a better car. My fault. But none of that happened, right? It was just like, okay, just we don't talk about. We're back at the house. Everybody's good. It's 10:30. It's late. Everybody get to bed. You'll feel your feet in the morning, son. Don't worry about it. Blah blah blah. Right? And everybody went to bed. So these are the things when I talk about that trauma. And then what's that codependency? Right? What's that reach in right there? Is that then you become reliant upon other people to provide things for you, right? So then I started looking at other people, coaches, at teachers, at other people to provide that fatherly instinct or that fatherly love to me. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when you look at codependency, it's the need to be validated by somebody else in order to feel okay about yourself. So since I didn't trust my dad, I'd go to coaches. I'm like, if I hit a home run today, they're going to say, great job, Chris. And I'm like, all right, this guy, now I'm okay, right? But if I don't hit a
Yeah.
home run, then I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Right? If I get a job, at whatever I get a job at, right? I always like, point out to the boss, Charlie, it takes him twice as long to restock the shelves as it does me, Ben. You know what I mean? He goes, Chris,
Right.
you are one of my best workers. I'm like, oh, I am? Oh. You know what I mean? But that's what we do, right? We constantly seek people's admiration of us, right? That's a codependency that I talk about. It's not being reliant upon somebody for like money. That's where people get confused. They think, oh, I'm not relying on my parents, Chris. I'm like, no, man, but you're relying upon those 8 chicks that you just met on Tinder this week in order to give you validation. You know what I mean?
I love that explanation. I've never connected trauma and codependency that way. And I think and the longer I've done this show, the more I've learned that because I used to say that too. I'd be like, oh, I never had any trauma. Nothing bad ever happened to me. But that's not true. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, plenty of things happen. My parents got divorced, whatever, like things happened. I also heard something else recently about trauma that I think is really key because it's also kind of ties into 12-step, which is that trauma is what happens when there is no empathetic witness to help you process.
Yeah.
And like you said, nobody ever talked about it again, right? And that's why later in 12-step, a 5th step can undo so much trauma because you go over what happened with a sympathetic witness who helps you process it and says, that wasn't your dad's fault. The truck died. Can you see that now? And you can say a little and you release some of that, And I think that's why that's such a key component of why that step helps people out,
And I agree with you on that. That's just part of the whole process. And the same thing, like, a little bit of the codependency happens like when you go back around and make those amends. There's definitely little points of it, but it just doesn't go deep enough into why do you do that? Does that make sense?
Right.
And for a lot of people, because that's when you said when you make that amends face to face, so it's like people you don't want to face or people that you're scared of or whatever, and then you make the amends and everything's okay, then you don't worry about that stuff anymore, right? And that's what you have to be careful of is when you look at that. But since I went back and became a therapist and things like that in this journey, I like to come at everything from a different side and just to see like what does it look like, right? And I always like to talk about mosh pit mentality. For most people, I feel like 90% of the entire country right now is starved for a purpose and they're starved for a passion. And we've become so selfish, right? In our own midst of like we don't care about other people anymore. We just don't. And I don't know what that's from. I don't know where the psychological disconnect there is. But when I say, like, what's the most supportive community? Like, they're like, is that the 12-step community? Like, I'm like, no, it's not the 12-step community. The 12-step community has some support to it, but it's definitely not the most supportive community. And then they're like, well, is it church then? Is it like faith-based groups? Like, are those like, is that where I should go if I want like a good friend group? I'm like, well, the good thing about a church is that you're not dealing with a bunch of addicts. So that way you actually get a different side of life. So you start to look and see like, oh, I guess, I can still do the stuff that other people can do. I don't always have to be on the addict side of life, but it's also not the most supportive. You know what I mean? Because both 12-step and faith-based groups do one thing when you fall. They ask you why. They ask you what you did wrong. There has to be blame put on something for why you're in the state you're in, whether or not it's a divorce, whether or not it's relapse, whether or not it's, whatever it is, it's like, what did you do wrong to cause this? And when I say mosh pit mentality, as Nate knows, when you're in the mosh pit, I don't care where it is. I don't care. I've been in mosh pits in Seattle, Washington. I've been in mosh pits in Miami, Florida. I've been in mosh pits in New York City. It's always the same. It's a chaotic, just like life, circle where everybody's cruising around top speed. And when somebody goes down, we do one thing. Everybody stops.
Really?
We reach down, we pick the person up, we look them in the eye, we say, "Are you okay?" Not, "What the hell is the matter with you? Why'd you fall down? Are you too drunk? Are you emo? What's the matter with you? What are you doing in this mosh pit? You don't belong here." You know what I mean? We don't say any of that. We go, "Are you okay?" And if they say yes, then we all continue. If they say no, then we pull them out and we get them help. But no other community does that. I've been on podcasts all over the world. And, I was just on one with Jesse from Kill Switch Engage, which is like a big metal band. And we were talking about this exact same thing. And we were pointing to how the punk rock community and the hardcore community is really the most loyal community, even though there's a lot of violence surrounding it. It's because the people that come there need an outlet. And we have done nothing in this society to provide an outlet for other people that don't know about that scene or that don't like that kind of music.
Right. Okay.
One of the things that I'm going to share the first time, I'm going to talk about this publicly on your show, because I know we're coming to the end here, but I'm really looking at starting a new group of support. And I call it AANA, because I'm tired of the borders. I'm so tired of, I equate recovery now to the school system, where it's like, are you a he, a she, a they, a them, or an it? It doesn't matter. It's a child, right? Don't put a name on it. It's a child. It's the same thing when you come into recovery. Are you coke, heroin, pills, alcohol, marijuana, trank, fentanyl? You know what I mean? You got 10 different things. Like, well, I'm this. Oh, well, you can't come in here then. You got to go 3 doors down to the left, and they meet 2 weeks from now. Oh, what? Oh, I need some today. So my new premise that I'm looking at, seeing what I can do to create this support group is AANA, because I want it to be the combination of the two biggest groups, right? This is a marketing genius of me. And it stands for Authentic Addicts Not Anonymous.
I like
because it goes against everything that they talk about, but it's what needs to happen. And here's what I mean. This would be your introduction, right? Instead of, "Oh, hey, I'm Chris, I'm a heroin addict." "Oh, this is AA. Oh, sorry, Chris, alcoholic." Is that okay? Okay, now I can say, "Great. Okay, cool. Thank you." It's, "Hey, I'm Chris. I'm a codependent with abandonment issues and some sexual trauma. I've used heroin and alcohol for the last 15 years of my life as my solution. It no longer works. Can you please help me?" Man, if we could have a group like that, we would start getting results immediately.
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm Sam. I was molested as a kid. I turned to meth and became a sex addict, and I've been using meth for the last 20 years. I just got out of prison. Can you please help me?" Boom, boom, boom. People are going to start blowing up right and left, right? Because that's what really we're talking about. Alcohol and drugs are never the problem. They're always a solution. So why am I going to identify myself as that? It doesn't make any sense. And I get it that in the initial part of that type of organization, you have to identify so people know that you're serious about wanting to change your life and they know that you've gone through the same things. But at the same time, you never hear people like, even at the meeting that we shared at the other day, I said, "I'm Chris Stewart. I'm a recovered alcoholic." Oh, the whole front row.
Yeah.
How dare you say recovered alcoholic?
I noticed you said recovered, and I didn't know if anybody else noticed that.
Oh yeah, I saw about 20 jaws drop.
Okay.
And I did it on purpose. And I said, "You know why? Here's why. Because it clearly states in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, after you work the 12 steps, you are a recovered alcoholic. That means you now can help other people." I said, "That's why I identify myself as a recovered alcoholic. So now I can help people that need help."
Right.
Not because I'm bragging about it. If I wanted to brag about it, I wouldn't be sitting here in this meeting even talking to you people. I got better things to do.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
First of all, I think that you should start your group. I'll help you with that. I think we should start it. If somebody is listening and they're in Mississippi or Illinois, and we don't have your group yet, right?
Right.
And they're going to 12-step because that's what's available, what else can they add to make their program and recovery more complete, right? If the assumption here, which I agree with, is that we can go beyond 12-step to get more healing and to get more help, what would you recommend someone do?
That's a great question. And, the thing is that things have changed dramatically in how you can get help these days, right? You have the internet, right? We didn't used to have the internet. You have Zoom. I would say get plugged in. What you need to do if you're early in recovery is you need to get as much support as possible on a daily basis. So there are websites out there right now that offer therapy sessions on a pro rate thing. You can actually get like a $50 therapy session on, like, I think it's called GoodWorks. But you can just literally type in, Google it, cheap therapy online sessions or whatever. And there are like 4 or 5 different organizations now that provide, it's like 1 hour a week, but you actually get a clinical psychologist. So even if you don't have insurance, if you have insurance, try to get some therapy. You know what I mean? Everybody should have a therapist. I have a therapist, right? Like, you have to understand the way you think. It's good for a professional to tell you why you think that way, so you don't think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Then you have like different 12-step groups. But the other thing is that, you can go to different 12-step groups all around the country now. You don't have to go to, like, if you live in, like, I love Mississippi. Like, I'm actually looking at buying land down there because my other new program that I'm starting is a firefighter first responder trauma center. And the reason I looked at Mississippi is because I can buy 30 acres of land and 2 houses for, like, no joke, $400,000 and be like less than 15 minutes from a major city. You know what? I'm all in on that. And so, but when you're there, like, the thing is that you can go to meetings in other cities, right? So, like, you don't have to just go to, like, because I know I've been down in meetings in Mississippi. I've been in meetings almost in every state in the country. And a lot of times it's you and like 3 senior citizen people. And if you're under the age of 40, that doesn't help you. All 3 of you guys already have 30 years of sobriety. I have 1 week. I don't want to go here. You guys don't understand what I'm going through. But you know what? You can go on and log into some meeting in LA, log into some meeting in San Diego, log into some meeting in New York City, right? Where it's like, just type in newcomer meetings in New York City and see what's on Zoom. Like, I mean, literally, you can just, even with your phone, you can go anywhere in the country right now, right? So you got your therapy, you got your 12-step. You look at getting into some kind of codependency work as well. That one's a little bit more tricky because not that many people offer it. And usually the people that do, it's more of like I offer it, but it's more of like a coaching service, right? And so it costs quite a bit of money. But the other thing is, just go on YouTube and start watching as many videos as you can of people that have successful recovery or people that want to do better in their life, right? I mean, even like, it's cliche to sound, but even like Tony Robbins, right? Like Tony Robbins, man, watch 10 minutes of Tony Robbins every day.
Yeah.
Get into some Deepak meditation, right? Like, do a guided meditation. Just sit on your floor for 10 minutes and play, today is going to be a good day. Today is going to be a good day. Today is going to be a good day. Like, I mean, there's hundreds of those videos on YouTube and they're all for free. So it's like, you really have no excuse for not being able to get the access or the health care or anything that you need nowadays, even without insurance. Everything I just gave you is without insurance. The other thing is, spirituality. I give you 6 vessels of spirituality for free. Ready? Prayer, meditation, sunrise, sunset, ocean, and nature. Those 6 vessels are free to everybody. Even if you don't live by an ocean, you live near some kind of water, that'll be good. But if you don't live there, you might live by some nature, right? Like, go take a nature walk. Go stand at the ocean. Go sit at the ocean. Just say the serenity prayer. I'm not talking, you don't have to like be some like fluent prayer warrior. Just say a prayer. Dear God, please help me today. That's it. That's a prayer. Meditation. I just gave you all the YouTubes. Sunrise, sunset. If you can watch either one wherever you live, it's something that will quiet your spirit, right?
Yeah, totally.
All these things are all basically for free or for very cheap, no matter what.
That's so true. That's true.
And being of service to other people, right? Doesn't matter how much time you have, man. Like, even if you're still using, be of service to people, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously don't bring drugs into like schools or anything, but you know what I'm saying? But, if you're still having a hard time and you're still drinking maybe 2 or 3 times a week or whatever, still smoking pot maybe 2 or 3 times a week, don't just wait till you're 100% abstinence to start getting help, man. Start getting it now.
I agree with that too. I think you can start taking some of those steps before you've completely quit. You can start learning this information. I know you agree with that too.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to hit rock bottom to start getting help. You don't have to completely put it into shambles. I mean, there's assortment of things you can do there.
Yeah. 100%.
Bad ideology that people have. They think you have to hit rock bottom before you get help.
Totally. So what does your life look like today?
Well, let's see. I have 2 books out now on Amazon. One's called Prayers, Punk Rock, and Pastry, from a hopeless dope fiend to a dopeless hope fiend. And then my second book just came out. It's called Gifts from God I Didn't Deserve. And it's the story of the 8 men in my life that changed the trajectory of my life without knowing it, right? Like, one's my barber, one was a Catholic priest, one was a business coach. And they are just like, those were the 8 guys that replaced my father in my life, that gave me good information that I was able to use later in life to change the trajectory of my life. And then the other half of that book is about my recovery story. Because, it took me I think 5 times to finally get sober over a 15-year period. So I do that. I am the district chairman for Interact Clubs for Rotary International, which means I'm in charge of about 400 high schools in Southern California for leadership programs. I have my own personal therapy business. I work as a curriculum developer for treatment centers here in Southern California as well. I have my own show on Facebook every Monday called Spiritual Gangster Monday.
Where can everybody find you and look up all your stuff?
I have a website. It's just ChrisStewartWorldwide.com. And then you can also follow that on Instagram at Chris Stewart Worldwide. And that's pretty much it. And on Facebook at Chris Stewart /Rockin' Amazing Life.
So for those of you that don't know, Chris used to be a counselor at a treatment center that I went to. And he had Spiritual Gangster Mondays. That was his group on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's why I started it.
Every Monday. We're the same shirt. Every Monday. It was fucked.
That's why I had that Spiritual Gangster shirt, didn't I, back then?
Yeah. It was like Groundhog Day.
I didn't know that. You were a counselor at SERC?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
I've been a counselor everywhere. Sober Life, SERC, West Coast, Shoreline.
Yeah. I didn't even know that. That's crazy. The center we're talking about, my husband went to too. It's like every dude I know went to SERC.
Yeah. And but so Chris,
shout out SERC, free plug.
Right.
There you go. Recovery Center.
Seriously.
Chris did Spiritual Gangster Monday, and he told me I don't know that I ever really believed in manifestation, and probably this one of my. So Chris told this story about how he in his bathroom he put a note up said you're gonna speak at the HA World Convention, and I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Pardon my language. I was like, this is a crock of shit. But at some point, I believed him, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna look myself in the fucking mirror, and as stupid as this fucking sounds to me, I'm gonna tell myself some positive things because Chris said to do that. And then I even recorded myself saying what I was gonna do, which is what I did with my life present day. And then that's how I really understood and found the power of manifestation, which still to this day blows my absolute mind. But Chris is who I learned that from. And I used to think oh, this guy's so full of fucking shit. But then I did it and it worked. And I was like, wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but not a lot of people know that. But I always like to tell that because that's that Chris is who I learned that from. Even though I didn't believe him at first.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. 100%. I love that. In fact, you'll see right up here behind me. This is my vision board for this year, right? And I do one every year. And, it's just a simple piece of cardboard paper. You can buy it at Walmart or whatever. And then you just cut out pictures of stuff you want to manifest in your life. And I've done it for the last 3 years. And no joke, every year, by the end of the year, I have literally done every single thing on there. Just to give you an idea, a year ago, I put a picture of the Great Barrier Reef on there to snorkel, right? I never even been to Australia. All of a sudden, a month later, I met this lady in Australia. We became friends, and COVID had still locked Australia down. But then this exact week last year, they opened up. So I went over to meet her. We got along great. We ended up dating. This is her in the picture right here. And all of a sudden, I go back and forth to Australia a couple times. And I go back 4 months ago. And no joke, I am on the exact boat in the picture in the Great Barrier Reef snorkeling. I mean, bizarre, right? Because when I put up that picture, I never even been to Australia, nothing. And within a month, I met somebody there. We started dating, and then I went over there, and we actually planned a trip. She planned a trip. I didn't even plan it. It was a surprise. And I looked, and it was the ship looked exactly the same as in the picture, and I was in the Great Barrier Reef. And that's just one example. I had another picture of a house down in Mississippi. I've been to Mississippi to go to Graceland, some other stuff, or Tennessee, that area, but never been there. All of a sudden, 3 months later, I'm in a town in Mississippi, and I meet the mayor, and we become good friends. I tell him about my idea, and he points me out to a house outside of town. I go there, and it's the house in the picture.
No way. Get out.
I couldn't make this stuff up. And it's just each one of these things happens, and I don't know how or when or why they're going to happen, but it's just bizarre that I put up a picture on January 1st every year.
I need to do that. And
by December the next year, I look back up, and in fact, under each one, when it happens, I put the date. So I know, okay, this happened here, and this happened here, and this, so I keep track of it so I remember. But it's just bizarre.
Really cool. Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool. I need to do that. Now I'm inspired to do
No,
that.
I'm telling you, it's the craziest
All
thing.
right, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I do a goals and gratitude ride every year at the studio where we write down what we were grateful for from the last year, goals for the next year, and I read them out loud during the class. And at my old studio, right, I was there 8 years. I had people's over the years, and they had often come true, right? But that's more of a like goal oriented, action oriented idea, right? But I also love the idea of just simply having the visual available because I believe, and I say this in my classes, it's not voodoo, right? What it is when you see something over and over and over again in your subconscious, you just start turning your feet in a slightly different direction as you make choices throughout the day because you've got that idea, right? And so you start doing things to get you in the direction of something that you've been looking at. And so actually, neurologically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. It's not just like magic right now. What you just described is, I mean, that's like wild, but you were, maybe that's why you reached out to the person in Australia. You know what I mean? Like you were, once you had those visible, you were like taking slightly different steps,
And it is, and it's a big part of just understanding that. Here's the thing. It comes down to, what do you want? I ask people this all the time. Like, it's one of the number one questions I ask when I work with somebody. I'm like, what do you want? And 99% of people say, I don't know. Like if you really could have anything you wanted, what would you want? Like, I don't know. I'm like, well, no wonder you use drugs and alcohol in this way. No wonder your life is in shambles because you're just going with life's chaotic flow. And if you don't get focused on what it is that you truly want, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You could just say, I just want to be a husband. Okay, great. Now we know. What do you have to do to become a husband? Well, I should probably get a job. Okay, that's a good start, right? I should probably get a car. Okay, that's another good start, right? And I should probably quit lying to everybody. Okay, there you go, right? But seriously, it sounds ridiculous, but it is. And it's like, and what are you going to have to do to become a husband? Well, I'm going to actually have to set up a relationship ideal, right? Like, I want my future wife to have a good family. I want her to be a high school graduate. I want her to have her own car. I want her to have a job. Okay, great. So don't settle for anything until you get this person. But don't expect, like, don't write all that stuff down and then, grab your phone and like hit Tinder and like go, oh, there's somebody. Let's see. No car, needs a ride to CVS to pick up sub prescription. I found my lady. I'll be right there. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they do. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, it didn't work out.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being ready at the last minute. I so appreciate it. I was like, I got a fucking Hail Mary. I hope Hollywood's available. And you were. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
As soon as Nate got here, I was like, okay, it's going to be really easy today. It's Hollywood. And he was like, oh, good. I was like, yeah, we can just sit back.
Seriously, it worked out great. It's like the only weekend.
Nate and I are running low on mental bandwidth these days. So we needed a home run today.
Always a pleasure. Always great to see both of you. I love you both. I love everybody.
I love you too, sir.
That is out here watching our show and supporting Jeannine, doing a great job. And listen, man, let's just move forward and really start focusing on what we can do for kindness for other people. You know what I mean? Like, that's leadership, right? Great leadership is not being the best of anything. The great leadership is going back and picking the other people and bringing them with you, right? And we need better leadership in this country right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you, sir.
We'll talk about the other stuff later.